He was 17 years old. He shouldn't have even been there. And in one split second on a black volcanic island in the Pacific, he made a decision that should have killed him, but it didn't. This isn't just the story of the flag raising on Iwo Jima. This is the story of a teenage Marine who jumped on a grenade and lived. And his name was Jacklyn Lucas. Iwo Jima was only 8 square miles, 8. But it would become one of the bloodiest battles in Marine Corps history. The island sat roughly halfway between the Mariana Islands and Japan. It had 3 airfields. To American planners, it was critical. It could provide emergency landing space for damaged B-29 bombers returning from raids over Japan. It could also serve as a fighter escort base. To the Japanese, it was sacred ground. They turned it into a fortress. Instead of defending the beaches, Japanese forces dug in beneath the island. More than 11 miles of tunnels, reinforced bunkers, interlocking fields of fire. When Marines landed on February 19, 1945, they expected resistance. What they encountered was something else entirely. The sand was soft volcanic ash, vehicles bogged down, Marines struggled to move, and the enemy was invisible. Gunfire erupted from underground positions. Every inch forward cost blood. By the end of the battle, over 26,000 Americans would be killed or wounded. It remains the only major battle in the Pacific where total American casualties exceeded those of the Japanese. Imagine fighting an enemy you cannot see. Imagine advancing while the ground itself seems to fight you. That was Iwo Jima. On February 23rd, 4 days into the battle, Marines climbed Mount Suribachi. They raised a small American flag. Later that day, it was replaced with a larger one that could be seen across the land. A photograph captured that moment. 6 Marines pushing a flagpole into volcanic soil. It would become one of the most iconic images in American history. But while the world would remember that photograph, most Marines were still fighting, still bleeding, still dying. And somewhere on that island, a 17-year-old Marine was about to be tested in a way few men ever are. Jacklyn Harold Lucas was born in 1928. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, he was 13 years old. Like many Americans of that generation, he felt something ignite inside him. He didn't want to watch from the sidelines. He wanted to fight. So at 14 years old, he forged his mother's signature and he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. 14. When the truth was discovered, he was reassigned to non-combat duty, truck driving. But that wasn't enough. He wanted to be in the fight, so he went absent without leave. He caught a train headed toward deployment. Then he stowed away on a ship bound for the Pacific. Eventually he turned himself in, but volunteered to fight so he wouldn't be charged as a deserter. Instead of sending him home, the Marines adopted him into Company Charlie, 1st Battalion, 26th Marines, 5th Marine Division. He would serve as a rifleman. On the voyage toward Iwo Jima, he turned 17 years old. Days after landing on Iwo Jima, Lucas and 3 other Marines were moving through a ravine. It was a tight terrain, restricted visibility, the kind of ground where ambushes happen. And that's exactly what happened. Enemy fire erupted. Lucas attempted to return fire. His rifle jammed. In that split second of chaos, he saw 2 Japanese grenades land near him and his fellow Marines. He had almost no time. He shouted to the others to take cover, and without hesitation, he threw himself onto the grenades. One of them failed to explode. The other detonated beneath him. Over 250 pieces of shrapnel tore into his body. The blast shredded his uniform. The Marines with him assumed he was dead. They continued advancing. Later, they returned to retrieve his dog tags. And that's when they discovered something almost unbelievable. He was still alive. Barely, but alive. 17 years old, and he made that choice. Not for glory, not for a medal, but for the Marines beside him. Lucas was evacuated from Iwo Jima. Doctors removed as much shrapnel as they could. But even after 26 surgeries, much of it remained inside him for the rest of his life. He would live with the physical cost of that moment forever. Yet when he later spoke about Iwo Jima, he didn't talk about heroism. He talked about brotherhood. He once said, "By the time I was carried off Iwo Jima, I knew much more about esprit de corps and the sacrifices men are willing to make for each other than I could have ever imagined." That is not the language of ego. That is the language of a Marine. On October 5th, 1945, President Harry Truman presented Jacklyn Lucas with the Medal of Honor. He became the youngest Marine and the youngest service member to receive the nation's highest military decoration during World War II. When asked if he considered himself a hero, he rejected the label. "I don't feel like I'm some big hero or anything like that. The real heroes are the ones who had to give their all." He was 17, and he understood that. Jacklyn Lucas didn't think he was special. He thought he was doing his job. But maybe that's exactly what makes stories like this powerful. Not because of the medal, not because of the headline, but because in one unguarded moment, a teenager chose sacrifice over survival. Iwo Jima was 8 square miles, but it demanded everything from the men who fought there. And some of them were barely more than boys. If you value stories like this, stories that remind us of what courage actually looks like, subscribe to my veteran journey. We're not here for myths, we're here to remember.